Chris Gillen, welcome to the Syndeo podcast. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome
Thank you, Oliver. Thanks for having me.
from Georgia, I believe, in the Grand Ole State or in the Grand Ole United States. So, Chris, thank you for joining us. Give us a little bit of background because you've been in the CX space for quite a few years. Like myself, you're no spring chicken. You don't mind me saying, but you've been around the industry. So, give me a little bit of background into
Yeah.
into yourself, if you don't mind, for our
Yeah,
audience.
it's a little known fact, Oliver. I started when I was 2 years old, so I'm really not that old. I just started when I was young. No, thank you for that, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show, Oliver. Yeah, like you said, I'm Chris Gillen. I'm the CEO and co-owner of a Closer Look, a market research and data analytics company here, based out of Georgia. I have been around a long time, 35 years, and the retail industry. I've had the distinct pleasure of working for some really well-known, best-in-class companies. I spent about 15 years with Target Corporation. It's where I cut my teeth. I owe a lot to Target. Was on the Target and the Mervyn's department store side, for those of your listeners that might remember Mervyn's. But also have been with Home Depot for a number of years. And I like to say my last real job was with Toys R Us, where I was global head of customer service and operations. And so retail is in my blood, as they say. And I have always been on, in some capacity, the operation or the customer service, customer experience, call center side of the business. So it's a service, guest service is a passionate topic for me, and really cool with what's happening in the world of AI right now. So happy to be on and talk about all of those wonderful things.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely come into a lot of that because the like yourself and I started just about the age of three, I think it was, in this
Good.
industry. Um, I've been floating around it for the best part of 30 years, back when we called them ACDs and contact centers or call centers, I think.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. I think recalling when you used to go to family weddings, etc., and you would, typically be asked maybe by back then an aunt or an uncle, maybe now it's a nephew or niece, what do you do for a living type thing, and you would be kind of more embarrassed to say, well, it's contact center technology, and I'm from the vendor side, and we build interactive voice response systems, those hated
Right.
systems where you press one, two, and three. But
Mhm.
more recently, last year, it was a wedding of a niece of mine, and everybody had heard, artificial intelligence and conversational AI, and of course, I was supposed to be the Illuminati who knew everything about that, and it was a topic of conversation. So it has certainly come somewhat in the last 30 years of technology, but we'll dive into that as we go through this through the podcast here. Um, you've mentioned some of the names: Home Depot, Toys R Us, Target. Obviously heavily retail. What have you seen over the last, 15, 20 years in that space from a customer service, customer engagement? And I suppose, not coming into the modern day, but what do you think has worked in the past and what hasn't worked? And I suppose, are there things we can learn from stuff that has worked in the past?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, the first thing I think I would tell you and your listeners is I try to always be brutally honest, whether you like it or not. And I think you can't talk about the retail vertical or retail industry and answer that question without saying not much has changed. And that's
Mm,
unfortunate. It's why I think retail is experiencing some of the issues that it's currently experiencing, because it really has not changed in the last 30 years. I mean, you walk into a physical location, it looks the same, it smells the same, it has the same merchandise, even when these companies come out and say, this is our new store prototype. It's a store of the future, which I love it when companies use that terminology, because you go there and you look at it and you say, this looks exactly the same as your other models. So I think what's happening in that space is it's being redefined. It's a perfect time for disruption. Certainly, a lot has changed on the e-commerce side of the business, and there's a lot of amazing, fascinating things that are happening there with buy online, pick up in store, and curbside pickup, and real time delivery. But the physical experience that you have going in the retailer has not changed, and it needs to. And I think you're starting to slowly see, especially with AI, companies start to adopt some technology that potentially will change that physical experience. And I'm hopeful for that, but they still have a long way to go. But exciting time really for all verticals, restaurants, retail, hotel, because we're just going through this period of mass disruption. And it's not just AI driven. I think that's a really important part.
Mm,
There's so many macro and micro things that are happening. They're just kind of changing, what I like to say, changing the very nature of how we think about consuming and how we think about working. And there's a trickle down effect that happens that I think is most of these companies are really feeling that effect of just a different level of consumerism. People are thinking about work differently. You have AI, that's this massive disruptor. So it's a really, really interesting pivotal time right now to see what's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years as all of these things kind of come to fruition. AI gets more of a foothold. So a lot of interesting things coming in, a great time to be watching this space.
and I mean, it's always particularly in a retail space. I guess obviously depends on the value of the product or service being sold, but brand loyalty and has always been important. And when I've been talking about the industry, organizations have always been looking at brand loyalty and have had, certainly in my view, very simplistic ways of measuring that. A basic CSAT, or even you still see them today, I think, using, rate us on Google for the experience, and they're only asking to give 5 stars because that's all they want. Have you seen in terms of how organizations have driven that brand loyalty, what sort of things have worked or indeed have not worked?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite conversations to have right now because I talk about it in two parts when we talk about loyalty: transactional loyalty and emotive loyalty. And let me explain. So, transactional loyalty is what everybody is familiar with. I go, whether it's a retailer or a restaurant, I download your app, I get perks and points and discounts for repeat business and to keep coming back. That's really been the model when we think about loyalty. It's been the model for 20, 30 years, right? But there's something interesting happening in the market now where this generation that's coming up is less inclined to be motivated by sheer loyalty and or price, like gimmicks and promotions and those kind of things. And I think what's happening, and I'm fortunate to talk to a variety of companies in a variety of different verticals, and I've heard a number of them say, our loyalty program just isn't working anymore. We're not generating the traffic. People are not signing up for it. Well, and there's a couple things that I would say to that is one, inflation is, it's big in the US. It's expensive to go out, to eat, to go out and shop, to go out and do anything. So when you think about transactional loyalty, if prices are really high, then yeah, I probably can't afford to keep going in 1, 2, 3 times a week to transact with you. The other thing is this generation that's coming up is certainly more socially conscious. And I think in surveys we've done and people that we've spoken with, people want a deeper connection with the brand. So price is always important, but price doesn't drive emotive loyalty. Emotive loyalty is that connection, that feeling that I have where I'm connected beyond the goods and services with the brand. And I always talk about that in terms of how do you build emotive loyalty? Well, you have to have open conversation with your customer. So it kind of gets us down this track of thinking about surveying and feedback and customer feedback. Ties into your the most hated thing for me right now is when I go into a business and I've got a little thing that says, give me 5 stars on Google. What that says to me is that you're in no way, shape, or form interested in my feedback. You just simply want me to go give you 5 stars. And so I also talk a lot about social media is great for marketing. Social media is not a customer engagement strategy. If you're really going to have a conversation with your customer, which you should if you're building emotive loyalty, you need to do that in a universal, simple, and private way. It transcends survey mechanisms that exist today because most of them are post-experience, post-purchase. And if I come into a Target store and I browse and you don't have what I'm looking for and I leave, that's a conversation I want to have with you. I want to know why you took the time to come into my store and didn't buy anything. Well, if you think about how you're measuring or getting feedback from your customer today, I would never get anything because I didn't purchase, right? And so most of those survey mechanisms are post experience. So we talk a lot about the importance of brands evolving their loyalty strategy, really figuring out how to create more emotive loyalty with the customer, again, transcending discounts, gimmicks, and price, and build a real connection. And there's some brands that do this really well. Patagonia is always kind of one of the first retail brands that comes to mind because they have a very, very loyal customer base. They certainly are expensive if you've ever been into a Patagonia. But man, I mean, customers, they're back. They're over and over because they do things to begin to really build this deep, personal, emotive connection with the customer. I think, Oliver, that's the future. That's what all brands are going to have to look at going forward. How do I begin to? It's what I like to refer to sometimes as the Taylor Swift effect. So if you think about somebody like Taylor Swift and her almost mythical ability to connect with her audience, right, and to build these, I think they're called Swifties, right? These just this loyal following. Brands should be looking at that. They should be saying, how do I build that to connect with my customer? Because that's true loyalty, is the emotive loyalty. So I told you it was a passionate subject for me, Oliver. So
I never thought for one moment coming in here, Chris, I'd be able to tie Taylor Swift to CX. But there's, there's many things we've done in the past. That has to be a first. And as we were recording this, actually, Taylor Swift was playing, I think, last night in Dublin. She's doing a tour of the UK and Ireland at the moment. And believe it or not, I did get offered tickets to go to see her in Wembley Stadium. When I mentioned it to my daughter, who's now in the US, she goes, "Why didn't you bring me?" I said, "Well, I'm not I am definitely not a Swiftie." But moving on from Taylor Swift, who is hitting the headlines, I think you're right. The whole brand loyalty thing, and I suppose Apple is another company that seem to have got that right over the years. And back to the Patagonia model as well. They're not cheap, and it seems to be indeed a reverse in the sense of almost the more expensive product or services, the more loyalty it drives. I mean, why do you think is it just a cost thing and the amount of investment and the amount of openness, I suppose, that an organization has to be to listen and understand and actually react? Is that the problem, or why so many organizations seem to fail?
Well, because I think a lot of companies over the last 20, 25 years have not truly understood the power of customer feedback. I think they look at, and I know this because I've run call centers for these companies, and I've sat in on these executive meetings, and I've listened to people say, "Hey, how can we take our $10 million CX budget and cut it in half?" And the question I always said is, "Well, we can do that, but what links are you willing to go to erode the customer experience?" And there's a disconnect, I think, between C-suite and the C-level and really them understanding the power of customer feedback. The second piece is think about, as I mentioned, how they're getting feedback today. Feedback mechanisms today primarily get to the disgruntled or detracting customer, right? That's typically who they're hearing from, the less than 1% of the customer base that has a problem. And so I think what's happened is they've kind of gotten to this position where they assume all customer feedback is bad customer feedback or people complaining. They have not seen the power of proactive, connected customer feedback. 90% of the people that are shopping with a brand or eating at a brand do so because they love it for one reason or another. So these are people you should openly ask, what are we doing right? What could we do better? Give us some ideas on what's next. And I've seen, feedback when presented that way, when you can collect it, it's amazing feedback. It really builds that connection. I think most brands just aren't really aware that customer feedback is as much a revenue driver and getting connection and repeat than a loyalty program or new menu items or a new product in your store. We need more companies to understand the value of it.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's. I agree with you. There's a huge, it's obvious in terms of churn and repeat customers. If you can get that loyalty right, they will continue to buy from you. But I think in my experience where I've seen it, the customer satisfaction has been in the CX domain. CX domain has typically been, up until more recently, the contact center. The contact center has typically been a cost center. So everything else in terms of revenue generating has typically been in the sales and marketing side, and they don't talk about customer feedback. It's, they're talking about, obviously selling it more
Right.
often to different target groups, etc. So I think until we can get that discussion, much wider across the organization and not just being seen as a CSAT, a customer satisfaction within a contact center that's a post-call survey or indeed a SMS post-interaction. It's just seen as, it's almost seen as saying, doing it because we feel we should, but not actually understanding why.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Most customer feedback today, companies respond to it reactively. I get a bad review, I reach out to you, I try to rectify it. Most of the times that bad review is just your personal perception. You may not like something, you had a bad experience. So there's really not anything you can do with that feedback. Like we talk about real customer feedback as tangible, actionable feedback that you can actually do something with. And when you get to the majority of your customer base and you incentivize and kind of nurture the feedback so that they know the feedback that they're getting is going somewhere and it's being responded to. I think the most powerful thing that brand can do to build that emotive loyalty is the next time somebody gives you just positive feedback that says, hey, I had a great interaction at your restaurant or retail store. What if somebody from the contact center reached out to them for nothing more than just to say, Oliver, we got your feedback. We want to thank you for your feedback. It's important to us. We want you to tell us what we're doing well and what we aren't. One, I ask this question all the time, and I haven't found one person that says, oh, I actually had a call like that once. But I ask the same question is, how would you feel if you got that call out of the blue, unsolicited, just to thank you for giving feedback? It's a game changer. And I know this because we implemented this. When I was at Toys, it's one of the things we tested. We said, what would happen if we just dedicated a whole month where we just started calling our customers who left positive feedback, right? And it was incredible because the first thing they said is, wow, I can't believe you're calling just to thank me for my feedback. Two, I always thought this feedback went into a black hole. I never expected to get a response or go anywhere. So that's how you nurture that conversation. And yeah, there's some expense to it, but it goes back to what you said, Oliver. When companies start to recognize the power of positive customer interaction and positive feedback, and they see that as a revenue driver and not an expense center, that's when the game will get changed.
Yeah, and I think we are moving in that direction, albeit quite slow.
Slow.
It still is, again, in the space, regardless of what organizations and depending who you're speaking to within that organization talks about, the ability to offer a personalized experience to help with revenue drivers. The core metrics still default to are something like agent handle time, the amount of containment you can drive, because that's easy to put dollars and cents on the saving, and it's much more difficult to extrapolate that out from a customer lifetime value.
Yeah. It's the worst thing you can do. It's one of the first things that I typically, if I run a call center, I try to find a way strategically to get rid of average handle time because it's a service killer, in my opinion. The agent now is just watching that clock tick and knowing that they only have minutes left to solve this issue. And that shouldn't be the way that it is. Again, driving emotive loyalty. If you create a great experience, if you put your processes in place, then you shouldn't have to worry about handle time. And matter of fact, handle time should be viewed as a positive way to build emotive loyalty with your customers.
Yeah.
So I'm in agreement, man. But those are the kind of shifts that call centers and companies are going to have to continue to make to kind of rethink these old measurements that were cost-driven measurements, and really think about how they create that more emotive, emotional connection with the customer.
And I know you guys at ACL, it is at a social look, you've carried out some surveying, sorry, if I can speak properly here, more recently. I think some of the points that you had around that, maybe if you want to delve into them, I think it was 60% of consumers chosen a brand based on expected service. I mean,
yeah, pretty incredible. Yeah, we release surveys. We're fortunate to have a very large database of consumers that we can poll on a regular basis, and about once a month we try to generate a new research paper or report where we're talking about things that are important. And we did this paper. Any of your listeners that want to go to acloserlook.com, it's available for free on our resource page. They can pull it down and they can look at it. And the reason that we did it, Oliver, is we said, there's all this talk and about how companies are thinking about implementing AI and what they're going to do and what it's going to look like. I wonder what the consumer is thinking right now, right? Because I haven't seen really any well done reports on, is the consumer really excited about AI? Have they interacted with AI? Kind of where are they? And so that's kind of the survey that we put out. And yes, 60% is actually what consumers say they choose a brand based on the expected service. And I tie this back to brands to say, you may not put a lot of stock in that mission statement and core values and what you stand for, right, on your website, because those are just, everybody has to have those. But consumers are looking at that, and consumers are saying, if you say you're customer centric and customer first, the consumer is expecting you to be customer centric and customer first. If you're not, then they're not getting the expected service. And if you're just focused on transactional loyalty, meaning price, you're probably not going to keep me around very long, because I'm going to go find somebody that's at the same price, maybe a little bit cheaper. I'm not getting what I need from you as a brand. And so that's a huge, I was expecting to see a big number, but 60% are really paying attention to what the brand is saying you can expect from me when you come in and interact with my business.
And you talk about a few things in that report. I think the AI plus the human emotion. Maybe I'm picking it up wrong.
No, yeah, you're good.
Explain that to me a little bit more in terms of what that means.
Yeah. Well, listen, there are a lot of people out there talking about AI. I am one of those. I love the subject. I do a lot of research. I spend a lot of time looking at it. But the one thing I always say is there really are no AI experts, because we're all learning at the same time. I mean, we really are. Maybe there's some of us that have a little bit more information than others, but this is a learning opportunity. And so as I dug into AI, talked to a lot of different companies, kind of seeing what's out there, there's two schools of thought right now, and these can be interchanged, but one is AI will replace everybody and everybody will be out of jobs. And the other is AI will enhance, and it will augment and enhance the staff you already have and make them better. It will increase the humanness of your business. And so as I've started to do my research, because I like to try to keep things simple, people have asked me in my presentations or on my podcast, what is the secret to success and implementation of AI? And I came up with this little equation, which is AI plus HEI, human emotional intelligence, really equals success. And what I'm saying there is that there will be companies that will implement with the intention to replace, right? If you think about fast food, notoriously cumbersome in hiring, getting people working. And I'm not too sure when you go into certain, and I won't say names on here, but when you go into certain businesses, not too sure how much of an emotional connection you're really looking for, other than just getting your hamburger and French fries. Yeah. And so that makes sense to me, right? But the majority of businesses, when you think about, are always going to have an element of human emotional intelligence that's required. When you think about fast casual dining, you're going to go in, you're going to sit down at your favorite restaurant, you're going to need human beings at some level, right? And so I think the best way to implement AI would be for brands to look at enhancing. And that's really what that equation is all about, is how do I create an environment where I'm really allowing the humanness of my business to come forward, because AI is going to take all of these mundane tasks and little things that people are focused on. I'll use my Target example, right? Go into a Target today and you will see people working, but you probably may not get engaged by somebody because they're too busy tasking, right? They're stocking shelves or putting stuff up. Yeah. AI eventually has the potential to alleviate a lot of that in various capacities. So what you're left with are now people like it was in the 1990s with Target, that actually come up to you and say, hi, how are you today? Can I help you find anything? I want to talk about a product. So when I say increasing the humanness of the business, that's really what I'm referring to. Both models will work under the right circumstances, But I really love brands right now that are starting to embrace this whole, I'm implementing AI for the sole purpose of making the humanness or the human element of my business better.
Yeah, and excuse me, and I think some brands are, you're right, are starting to do that, or at least playing with it. I think I'm not sure how familiar you are with IKEA, so they have introduced
Yeah,
automation for sure, but actually, rather than replacing their
that's right.
contact center agents, basically, what they've then retrained those agents to help customers who are looking different services, such as maybe a bathroom planning service or a
That's right.
kitchen planning service. So
Yeah.
I get, is that the type of thing you're thinking of when you're talking about combining the automation or the AI with
Yes.
the human emotion side of
Yes.
things?
Absolutely. You know, we can't forget as humans, we crave connection. It's in our DNA. It's who we are. Not socializing, not having conversations is not healthy for us as human beings. So there's going to always be some need for a human connection or a human element of the business. I'm convinced of that until robots take over the world and wipe us out, I guess. But for now, anyway, I think that that is the right strategy. I love the IKEA story. I think it's a great example of how they're kind of putting a toe in the water. They're bringing their employees along with them because there's a lot of fear right now in companies where people are saying, "Am I going to lose my job? Are you going to implement some bot or something that's going to eliminate me? And what's going to happen to me?" There's a lot of fear, and I think the companies that are looking at how I bring my employees with me is important. Target just implemented the same thing, so Target did something very similar to IKEA, and now they've deployed a bot on all of the tablets and devices that the employees have access to allow them to help the customer better,
Hmm.
right? So it's information they can access, things they can know, all designed to really create a better human to human experience. And I think that's important for many brands that will need to do that. So when you bring your employees along with you, and you help them understand, I think that creates a much better workplace environment for those people than not talking about anything, implementing something, and then suddenly, you know, people are out of jobs. And that may happen. I'm not saying that that won't happen. I'm just saying companies have to really think and be thoughtful about the approach they're going to take.
Yeah. And I think, that brings home to me, it was a conversation in one of the previous podcasts where we were chatting about innovation. And again, myself being a technologist, the default is innovation means technology.
Yeah.
But innovation shouldn't start with technology. Innovation should start with, by definition, innovating. So those companies who are thinking about innovative ways of engaging or their employees or their customers, and then layering on top of that the technology that maybe allows that innovation to be better,
That's right.
are the ones that are really thinking. And again, I don't know if you've come across much innovation within the companies outside of purely the tech aspect of it. Because again, we all tend to default, particularly in the current day and age with
We
generative
do.
AI.
That's really kind of an interesting topic because I think if you do ask people what is innovation, that's the first place they go is new technology, you know, something that's new to this market. But that isn't innovation. It's not siloed, is it? It's
Yep.
innovation can come from many forms and many places, and I think it opens the door to doing different things. I've always been a believer of cross pollinating across verticals. You know, hiring somebody from the retail world to come in and take a look at your restaurant business and vice versa, because they bring various innovations, if you will, that are process driven that can help enhance or increase or better. So I love that. It's not always technology, it's process of thought too. I do think technology opens the door to what's possible and what you could do. But innovation by itself is not just technology. It's a multitude of things. I like that.
Yeah, and again, I think unfortunately or fortunately, but again, being in this industry for a while, I've tended to notice it's the vendors, it's the tech people who tend to drive and who shout loudest. And there used to be a saying way back in the day, no one gets fired for buying a Big Blue, which is the IBM story.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of that happening now with almost executives within these organizations thinking we must use generative AI. And obviously, as we know, there's a handful of mega vendors out there. So it's almost being if I'm not using generative AI within my organization, there's a chance I'm going to get fired. So I'm not seen to be innovating, as opposed to, again, I think it's an oxymoron almost, stepping back and thinking what it is I want to innovate on, and does this piece of technology help or not?
Yeah. You have companies, AI-driven companies moving at the speed of light. I mean, literally moving at the speed of light. And so I like to say they're in full sprint with the development of AI and kind of the next evolution of it, and generative AI and super intelligent AI and all those things. But consequently, you have companies that are walking, not sprinting, to try to figure it out. So there's a disconnect right now. And I hear this from the AI companies that I talk to. It's like, they got an incredible product. It's great. Nobody's buying it. And why is nobody buying it? It's not because it's not incredible and great. It's because companies just don't know what to do. You're starting to see them do that. The Targets, the IKEAs, places like that. But SMB companies are a bit paralyzed, I would say, with lack of resources, lack of funding, not really understanding what to do, how to do it. Meanwhile, consumers are starting to engage with AI in certain places. The other part of that study, Oliver, was I was really surprised about this. We asked, we surveyed almost 1,800 people, but we asked them, had they interacted with AI with whatever company, and 67% of them said yes, they have interacted with an AI chat tool. Now, I take that with a grain of salt, because they could be interacting with something that's not technically AI, but their perception, which is really important, is that they've interacted. And what you start to see when you drill down in there is you ask the question, how did you like it? Basically, 50% of them said they've had poor experiences or negative opinions. So I say that because companies that are rushing to throw stuff in and not thinking about the front-facing customer aspect could be doing more harm than good. They could be thinking about it of, this is going to lower cost. I'm going to get rid of, I don't need 50 agents anymore. This bot can handle everything. But they could be doing, that could be a bit perilous, because they could be doing that if not done correctly, and eroding that customer loyalty. And so that was I've shared that study with a number of companies and said, this is why it's so important for businesses to really strategically think about when, where, and how to implement AI in their business.
And I think, we'll maybe delve into it. And I know we're getting question time here, so hopefully we'll come back for a follow-on episode where we can delve into a lot more on the AI side of things. But I think I also see that there's a large drive within organizations to think about efficiencies from within the organizational perspective. And this ties back to your brand loyalty point, but they don't necessarily think, is that an efficient or indeed inefficient way for my customer to engage me? Be that offering it across multiple channels, or trying to switch them from a phone or voice channel to a web or messaging or whatever. So they don't, I think there's not enough thought and planning going into the efficiencies, or more importantly, inefficiencies from the consumer side, in terms of that engagement. Again, I don't know, I think you picked some of that up in the survey as well, if I remember.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting topic, because I have, in the old school call center world, right? You're told you've got to be where the customer is in whatever channel you want that to be in. And that, okay, well, that was good. I've always operated under the opinion that may be counterproductive to effective customer experience relationships, because, why do I want to have 15 different ways for the customer to contact me when I can have one or two that are universal, that work well for the customer? And as long as I educate the customer on the best way to get in touch with me, I think that's really important. The second piece of that is, in that same survey, and I think this is kind of what you were getting to, is how effective are those interactions that the customer is having with AI, no matter what channel you put it on, right? And what we're finding is there's already distrust between the consumer and AI. One of the stats was, and this was pretty staggering, 87% of those people that surveyed said that AI in no way, shape, or form could be empathetic or emotionally connect to them. So when you think about those transactions that someone has where it's frustrating. Maybe it's screwed up my hotel stay or my flight or whatever. They believe that if they're interacting with AI cannot emotionally connect with them. And so you think about, again, kind of goes back to what we talked about, how you implement it, what's the context, when is it appropriate for that to go to a human being who can have that, emotional, empathetic connection with you. And 61% of those people said AI interactions were less effective than humans. And that's a really interesting topic because you think about AI being more efficient, right? We all think about that. Oh, this is great. It's going to answer your question. But according to the customers that are interacting with it, they feel it's less efficient than talking to a human because a human understands that emotional connection, the context of the conversation. It understands sentiment, right? I know if you're angry, upset, mad, I can match in kind. AI will get there. I'm convinced that it will get there. But right now, according to the customer, it's not as effective as just talking to a human.
Chris, that is a brilliant place to take us and park us for right now. We're going to pick up in the second part of this, where I think we'll delve a lot more into AI. You mentioned earlier in the podcast here that it's a level playing field. We're all learning, and yourself are learning a lot, as we all are. So I'm going to delve a little bit more into that. I think you have some processes around to where AI is at, and we'll talk about that. And I guess it'll also maybe look a little bit into the future. So thanks for this morning. We're going to pick up again in the next part of the episode. Chris
Awesome.
Gillen,
Looking forward to it, Oliver. Thank you.
Cheers.